Friends, brothers and sisters, are you familiar with this book? Are You My Mother? Originally published in 1960. I'm pretty sure this book was read to me when I was a child. It's possible you read it to some of your children. Some of you may be young enough that you had it read to you, and now you may even read it to your grandchildren. This book is an illustration of so many of the ways that we shape and understand family and how we talk about family, even from such a young age. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this book, it starts out with a mother and an egg, and the egg shakes, and the mother goes off to find some food for the baby that's going to hatch out of the egg. And the baby hatches while the mother's away and falls out of the bird's nest. And then he wanders around asking everything he comes across, "Are you my mother?" And eventually he encounters a mechanical thing, a snort, as it's called in the book. And the snort picks up the baby bird and puts it back in the nest, and then the mother comes back and they live happily ever after. This book is an illustration of what it means to ask the question, who is my family? Who is my mother? Who are my brothers and my sisters? Who is in the circle of care that will nurture me and care for me and be in my corner? You see, even from a young age, we begin to develop the idea of who is family and who is not. Biologically, we're hardwired for recognizing faces and voices and smells, and as an infant, we begin to discern those very things. We begin to learn the boundaries of who is and is not a part of our family. So when I ask the question, who is my family? There's a very good chance that you've been thinking about that, whether you're aware of it or not, for most of your life. And we probably have boundaries over what it means to be a part of family. We cut the line off at some point of being family and then moving on into not family. And some of us, that begins with just that one or two people that live with us that are our nuclear family. Sometimes that extends beyond the nuclear family into cousins and grandparents and aunts and uncles and children and grandchildren. It goes further and further out. But at some point we get to that third cousin twice removed, and they may technically be family, but we don't necessarily treat them that way, do we? You see, the way we relate to other people hasn't changed a whole lot in the several thousand years of human existence. In the first century, Jesus' time, the Greco-Roman world was set up in a very similar structure to our own. Now, in the middle, this part didn't really exist in that Greco-Roman world as far as it does today. But in the middle, we have the self. We have me. I'm at the center of everything. The notion of I, the notion of an individual, really is at the center of our modern society, isn't it? Our individual rights, the way we take care of ourselves. And even Jesus says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so the self is at the center of this. But in the ancient world, the first century and beyond, the self was just a part of a larger unit called a family. And that's still true today. We're a part of a family. We look at books and we learn throughout our lives who is and isn't a part of our family. But in the ancient world, the family was the foundation, the bedrock of existence, the bedrock of society. Everything centered around the family. You ready for your Latin lesson today? This is called the pater familias, the father's household. You read about that over and over again in the Bible, don't you? My father's house has many rooms. The father's household. This is the foundation of all of society, of all civilization in that time period. The father is at the center, and everybody else is sort of peripheral to that in that relationship. And if the father isn't there, it's the eldest brother who gets that responsibility for everyone else in the family. And so when Jesus' mother and brother and sisters come looking for him, you'll notice that Joseph isn't there. Joseph is probably dead at this point in the story. Otherwise, he would have shown up as the responsible party for Jesus, because he is the father of the household. But because he's not there, chances are Jesus is the eldest brother. And so his mother and all the siblings come and catch him and say, you need to get your act straight. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit, because we have other circles, don't we? The next circle out is the clan. And that goes from the family. And I have to point out that I have to give credit to my wife, Amy, who came up to me after 9 o'clock and said, did you skip clan on purpose? And the answer is no, I just forgot it. So the clan is the next one out in the circle. And that's sort of the people that are loosely connected to you. That's that second and third cousin, the people that show up to the family reunion that you kind of know exist but don't really care about all that much, except when they show up and you pretend. Right. Then the next circle out is the tribe of Benjamin, the tribe of Judah. This is sort of your community. These are the people who live in your area, the people you work with, the people you go to school with, the people you see often enough but can't remember their names and you're too embarrassed to ask their name, but you want to see how they're doing anyway. You care about them, but not in the same way you care about your family, right? Then the circle of empathy, the circle of care goes further out into national identity. So there's a nation, this concept of nation. We care about people whom we share nationality with differently than we care about our family or ourselves. See, the first century wasn't all that different from modern times in the ways that we relate and care to each other. Now, this is the first century. It kind of stops at nationhood, but I'm going to take a leap of faith here and say, I think modern times we can extend it further. My paper can't, but we can. To a world identity, a world caring. We are cognizant of other people elsewhere in the world, of other nations. And if we want to get science fiction into that, we can go into a solar system caring and a Milky Way caring. And I'm being ludicrous at this point, so I apologize. But these are the circles of care that represent the ways we relate to each other. Who is family and who is not? And the lines may blur depending on your individual life or the way that you function in this world. But the lines are still there. We care about different people. We care about people differently depending on how we relate to them. You might be willing to pay someone in this circle's way in college, but maybe not this one. Or you may complain if the nation decides to take care of people's way to go to college, because you had to pay for yourself. Do you see the way that we care differently about different people in society? So when we read what Jesus is doing in Mark, he's taking this picture and he's messing with it, because Jesus messes with everything. He takes all of society and turns it upside down and redefines what it means to be family. And if we read the rest of Mark chapter 3, we discover that he's been causing problems and doing all sorts of things to mess with this foundation of society. He's taken the pater familias and redefined it in the way that he loves people and includes people and relates to people. When we read in the scriptures this section, the way it is introduced to us is Jesus' family believes Jesus is beside himself, which is lingo in the ancient world to say, dude's nuts. He's off his rocker. He is gone crazy. He is saying things he's not supposed to, talking to people he's not supposed to, and we need to get him under control. So Jesus' mom and his siblings come and say, Jesus, we need to have a talk. You are misbehaving. You need to come home with us until you get your act straightened out. That's what's going on right here in Mark chapter 3. While his family has set out to come and collect him, he's in a house so crowded that nobody can eat anything because there's so many people there. And the scribes and the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, have said, the only way Jesus is doing this is he has to have power from some other supernatural being. Because he's not saying things that are appropriate for a child of Abraham, for a Jewish person. The only way he can do the things he's doing is he has to have aligned himself with some spiritual force of wickedness. And they name it in Mark chapter 3, the Beelzebul, which is a Canaanite god, Baal-zebub, which translates to the Lord of the Flies, in case you were ever curious about that and where that book title might have come from. This is a Canaanite deity, a foreign god that they're accusing Jesus of aligning himself with, because no good Jew would say or do the kinds of things Jesus is doing. And I love the way C.S. Lewis captures this in his talks on the radio that got published as Mere Christianity. I'm going to read this for you. This is C.S. Lewis. A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on a level with the man who says he is a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman, or something worse. Lewis captures what is going on in Mark chapter 3. Jesus is either aligned with some spiritual force of hell, or a madman, or he is who he's saying he is, and he is the Son of God. And so, depending on what our choice is, we need to take Jesus seriously when he takes this picture, creates it into a Venn diagram, and says, my family is defined by people who do the will of God. It's not this circle of people that I just happen to have been born into. It's the people who are doing what God is doing. And I want to be clear about this because Jesus doesn't say anything about belief or theology. And it breaks my heart that a little bit because I love theology. And I love how beliefs and actions are tied together. But he doesn't do that. If we take Jesus at the words that are in Mark, then it's only those who do the will of God. And what is the will of God, you might ask? Doing justice, loving kindness, walking humbly with God. We get that from Micah. The people who are a part of Jesus' family are doing the sort of things Jesus did. Jesus redefines the foundation of society. He turns it upside down and inside out so that it can be recognized that our relationships are different. We define those boundaries differently than the rest of society. Who is my family? My family is revealed by the actions that they do. Doing the will of God is the litmus test for people who claim to be a part of Jesus' family. It's not the people who get their theology straight. It's not the people who believe correctly, whatever correctly gets defined to be in whatever circle you want to run in. It's not whether you sprinkle, dunk, or splash a child or an adult in baptism. It's not whether you believe in any of the fancy words about communion, whether or not it's literally the flesh and the blood of Jesus in a transubstantiational sense, or whether you believe it is the accidental presence of God meeting us in grace, and that it's really just bread and juice, and God works through ordinary things like that. It's the what we do that matters. And I love that because it means you don't have to look the same as me. It means you don't have to believe the same as me to be a member of God's family. You see, Jesus is not prescriptive in this statement. It's descriptive. It's descriptive in the sense of those who do the will of God. And so that can include those of you who are cultivating a garden at home so that you can care for the earth and brings forth beauty and life into it. It includes those who are advocating for health care reform so that all can be treated and cared for in for medicine without having to break the bank and going bankrupt in the process. It includes those who are going to go to the hospital and sit with someone when we can do that once again. It includes those who are writing a card to let someone know that they're cared about and remembered. It includes tutoring a student to help them achieve the best that they can do. The will of God is vast and diverse and beautiful in the ways that we can all participate and do it in this life. I want to tell you about a group of people here in Florida who practiced the will of God in a way that you might not be familiar with or appreciative of. After Hurricane Andrew came through and leveled so many things, and the various hurricanes that came through in Florida, churches could not find insurance. At that time, churches had to get individual property insurance, and nobody wanted to insure anybody who could deal with the wind and water damage that we deal with here in Florida. So a group of people in the Florida Annual Conference got together and said, well, what if we bundled it all together and create an opportunity for all churches in the Florida Annual Conference to work together to get insured? And that was the beginning of the Ministry Protection Committee. Doing the will of God sometimes looks like serving on an administrative committee to enable churches to do the kind of ministry they're doing without fear of a hurricane coming, leveling the building, and never being able to rebuild because they didn't get insurance. Who thought insurance could be a way of expressing the will of God, right? We can do these things, and it's so diverse and beautiful, serving God in so many ways. Because according to Jesus, those who are doing the work of God, the will of God in this world, are members of the family. And that enables them to build those relationships of care across lines that society says we should have. Are you a member of my family? Are you my mother? You are if you do the things of God and imitate the one who came and walked among us. Another aspect that I think is beautiful of this is that none of us get it right. We always mess up. We always fail to be an obedient church, as we're going to say in a few moments for our communion liturgy. So if you're feeling imperfect, or you're feeling not quite up to it, or you feel like you've let Jesus down, know that just in the act of doing, you are bearing witness to being God's family. And so, brothers and sisters, as we engage in this practice, as we try to seek to live into this reality, we get to go visit a woman at the well, because nobody else will talk to her. We get to tell a story where an outcast is a hero, like the Good Samaritan. We get to give dignity to people who are untouchable and outcast from our society by touching and healing and giving them space and dignity. We get to make time and space for children, to have a voice and a place. Because these are the sort of things Jesus did. And if you ever want to know what the will of God is, check out Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're the first 4 books of the New Testament. You can find them about 2/3 of the way through the Bible. Or if you have an app, it's really easy to find them. Do the sort of things Jesus did. Like that alarm that just went by, the EMTs or the paramedics. They're going to go heal somebody. Be the hands and feet of Jesus. Let us practice doing the things of God, so that the world might know and glorify our Father in heaven and be welcome into the family of God.